Why are you hiding your phone? Charles Harper's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet authority in it sliced through the soft light of the hotel suite, stilling the air between us. He wasn't just asking a question. He was dissecting a threat. His tattoo-inked throat shifted as he swallowed, jaw tight, eyes locked not on my face, but on the device I'd just turned over, screen down, like a guilty secret. The same hands that had once broken men with a gesture now curled around his phone, knuckles pale, control fraying at the edges. And in that moment, I knew something dangerous had shifted. Because Charles Harper, the man who ruled an empire without ever raising his voice, had noticed the one thing I desperately hoped he wouldn't. And whatever I thought I was keeping private wasn't private anymore. Sophia Seeger stood by the window, the morning light threading silver against her skin as she adjusted the diamond necklace resting at her collarbone. Calm, immaculate, like nothing in the world could touch her. Except he was already watching. Charles leaned back slightly, dressed in black from throat to wrist, expression unreadable, the kind of danger that didn't need to announce itself. His gaze should have been on the necklace, but it wasn't. It was on the phone she'd just slipped out of sight. Face down, hidden. His tone remained smooth when he finally spoke, but the steel beneath it was impossible to miss. Why are you hiding your phone, Sophia? She froze, not visibly, just enough that someone like him would notice. Someone trained to read fear. Lies, secrets. Someone who didn't believe in coincidence. From that second on, their working relationship stopped being simple. Not when encrypted messages began appearing. Not when surveillance footage surfaced. Not when Charles realized the truth. Someone was watching her, and using her to get to him. The only thing more dangerous than betrayal was the way his control slipped every time she looked back at him. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Now let's begin. The notification lit up my phone at exactly 9:47 p.m., and my hand moved before my brain could stop it. Screen down. Immediate, instinctive. Charles noticed. Of course he noticed. Charles Harper noticed when a stock ticker shifted half a point, when a board member's smile lasted a fraction too long, when the temperature in a room dropped a single degree. He'd survived 3 assassination attempts and a hostile family coup by noticing things other men missed. So when his executive assistant, the woman who'd sat across from him for 2 years without flinching, who'd negotiated with Yakuza underbosses and Silicon Valley executives with the same unshakable composure, suddenly moved like she was hiding something? He noticed. Sophia. My name in his mouth was different now. Not the usual measured cadence he used during contract negotiations, or the slightly warmer tone reserved for our rare moments of almost friendship. This was the voice I'd heard him use exactly once before, on a phone call with a man who'd embezzled $7 million from one of Charles's humanitarian foundations. That man had disappeared 3 days later. I looked up from the quarterly reports spread across his desk, meeting those dark eyes that revealed nothing and calculated everything. Yes? Your phone. He didn't move from where he stood by the window, the Tokyo skyline glittering behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered through blood and discipline. You've checked it 14 times in the past hour. I had. I knew I had. The messages kept coming, each one more specific than the last, each one proving that someone was watching us. Watching him. Through me. It's personal. The words came out steady. Professional. The same tone I'd used to deflect questions about my weekend plans or my family I never talked about. Personal. He repeated the word like he was tasting poison. Then he moved, crossing the space between us with that predatory grace that reminded everyone Charles Harper hadn't bought his way to power. He'd bled for it. Everything about you became my concern the moment you signed your NDA, Sophia. Your security is my security. Your secrets are my vulnerability. His hand was on the desk now, inches from my phone, close enough that I could see the faint scar across his knuckles, the one he'd never explained. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, something that probably cost more than my monthly rent. So I'll ask you one more time. His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. Why are you hiding your phone? The phone buzzed between us. Another message, another piece of surveillance I couldn't explain without sounding insane or guilty or both. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Charles Harper wasn't asking because he trusted me. He was asking because he was terrified he couldn't anymore. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Outside, Tokyo hummed with millions of lives that didn't hang on a single answer. But in this room, in this breath, everything hinged on what I said next. It's complicated, I whispered. His jaw tightened. Complicated means dangerous, Sophia. And dangerous means I need to know. Now, I unlocked the phone with trembling fingers, and that alone told him everything. Sofia Seeger didn't tremble. Not during hostile takeovers. Not when Yakuza lieutenants tested her composure. Not even when Charles himself turned the full weight of his attention on someone who'd failed him. But my hands shook as I pulled up the messages and slid the phone across the desk toward him. He read in silence. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes while I watched his expression shift through micro-calculations I'd learned to read over 2 years of studying the man who never showed his hand. The first message was time-stamped 6:23 a.m. Target departed residence 619. Black sedan. 2 security. Route A7. Second message, 9:15 a.m. Morning meeting Summit Industries rescheduled. Contact James Chen. Conflict of interest noted. Third, 2:47 p.m. Lunch location changed. Nobu. Companion, Minjun Park. Discussion, Seoul expansion. Fourth, just 7 minutes ago. Evening schedule confirmed. Subject remains penthouse. Assistant present. Vulnerability window assessed. Charles looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something crack beneath that carefully constructed mask. Not anger. Worse, fear. How long? His voice was barely above a whisper. 3 weeks. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold, despite the climate-controlled office. At first I thought it was spam, some kind of scam. The messages were vague, generic, but then they started including details. Things only someone watching you would know. Your schedule, your meetings, the restaurants you choose, the people you... The encryption. He cut me off, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. This isn't standard messaging. Someone with resources built this. Someone with access to surveillance networks, traffic cameras, probably my own security feeds. I'd suspected the same thing, but hearing him confirm it made my stomach drop. Charles, I swear I didn't. I know. He said it with absolute certainty, and something in my chest loosened slightly. If you were the leak, you wouldn't be checking your phone like it contained a bomb. You'd have deleted these or never shown them to me. He set the phone down carefully, deliberately. You're not the spy, Sophia. You're the courier. Someone is using you to prove they can reach me. The implications settled over us like fallout. Someone inside his network. Someone close enough to know his movements before he made them. Someone who'd chosen me, his most trusted assistant, to deliver the message. Why me? The question came out smaller than I intended. Charles looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in those dark eyes. Something that made my breath catch, for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Because you're the only person I trust completely. His jaw tightened, which means you're the perfect leverage. Another message buzzed. We both stared at the phone like it was a coiled snake. Charles picked it up, read it, and his knuckles went white around the device. What does it say? He turned the screen toward me. 5 words that changed everything. She doesn't know she's bait. The phone shattered against the window with enough force that I flinched. Safety glass held, but spiderweb cracks bloomed across the surface like frozen lightning, distorting the Tokyo skyline beyond. Charles Harper didn't throw things. Charles Harper didn't raise his voice. Charles Harper had built an empire on the foundation of absolute control, the kind of discipline that made grown men confess their sins before he even asked the questions. But he was breathing hard now, chest rising and falling beneath that perfect Tom Ford suit. And when he turned to face me, the mask was gone. Do you understand what this means? His voice was rough, scraped raw. They've been watching you for 3 weeks, Sophia. 3 weeks while you sat in meetings with me, while you drove to my properties, while you went home to your apartment every night thinking you were safe. I stood frozen by the desk, unable to process the shift. This wasn't the Charles I knew, the one who negotiated billion-dollar deals with the same emotional investment as ordering coffee. This was something underneath, something dangerous and uncontrolled and directed entirely at protecting me. They've mapped your routine. He was pacing now, another thing Charles Harper never did. They know where you live, where you shop, which route you take to work. They know you stop at that cafe on 5th every Tuesday for the matcha latte you pretend you don't have a sugar addiction to. That detail stopped me cold. How do you? Because I notice everything about you. The words exploded out of him, and the silence that followed was deafening. I notice that you hold your breath when you're nervous, that you touch your left earring when you're about to disagree with me, that you take the stairs instead of the elevator because you hate small enclosed spaces, even though you've never said why. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Charles, I notice, he continued, quieter now but no less intense, that you smile differently when you talk to your sister on the phone versus when you're being polite to clients, that you read the last page of books first because you need to know people survive, that you haven't taken a single vacation day in 2 years because you're terrified of being dispensable. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could see his chest still heaving, could see the veins in his neck, could see 15 years of cultivated control burning away to expose something raw and real and utterly terrifying. So yes, Sophia, I understand what it means that someone is using you as bait. Because losing you isn't a strategic setback or a security breach. His hand came up, hovering near my face but not quite touching, like he was afraid he'd already broken too many rules. Losing you is the one variable I have no contingency plan for. The confession hung between us like smoke, impossible to take back. You can't say things like that, I whispered, but I didn't step away. I know. His jaw clenched. But they already know. That's why they chose you. That's why this works. Another buzz. Another message. Both our eyes went to my phone, lying face up on the desk. He's already lost control. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Charles had his security chief in the penthouse within 20 minutes. Dmitry Volkov was a brick wall of a man who'd followed Charles from Seoul to Tokyo to San Francisco, loyal as a shadow and twice as quiet. He listened to everything without expression, examined my phone with gloved hands, and finally spoke in that thick Russian accent that made every word sound like a threat. Phone is clean. No spyware, no tracking software, nothing physical. He set it down carefully. Messages route through 12 proxy servers across 8 countries. Professional-grade encryption. Whoever this is, they want you to receive these, but they don't want to be found. Can you trace it? Charles's voice was back to its usual controlled tenor, the mask rebuilt, but I could still see the cracks underneath. Already tried. Dead end at a server farm in Bucharest that doesn't technically exist. Dmitry's eyes shifted to me, assessing. Miss Seeger, have you noticed anyone following you? Strange cars, same person in different locations. Anything unusual? I thought back through 3 weeks of messages, trying to remember if I'd felt watched. No, nothing. Then I paused. Wait, there was something. 2 weeks ago, someone sent flowers to my apartment. No card, no name. I thought they'd been misdelivered. What kind of flowers? Charles asked immediately. White lilies. The memory felt different now. Sinister, instead of mysterious. A dozen of them. I gave them to my neighbor because they reminded me of funerals. Something passed between Charles and Dmitry. Some wordless communication I couldn't read. In Korean culture, Charles said quietly, white flowers are given to honor the dead. Someone was sending you a message, Sophia. They were telling you that you were already a ghost. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the desk. Why would they warn me? They're not warning you. Charles moved closer, and I could see the anger burning behind his careful composure. They're demonstrating control. They're proving they can reach you anytime, anywhere. That your life continues only because they permit it. Dmitry cleared his throat. There's more. I pulled Miss Seeger's building security footage for the past month. Same delivery man, appears 7 times. Different uniforms, different companies, but same build, same gait. Professional surveillance operative. 7 times? My voice cracked. What was he delivering? Dry cleaning, groceries, packages from retailers you actually ordered from. Dmitry's expression was grim. He's been intercepting your real deliveries, checking them, then bringing them up. You've been opening your door to the same man for a month and never knew it. The implications crashed over me like ice water. Every time I'd smiled at a delivery person, every time I'd signed for a package in my doorway, wearing pajamas, vulnerable, and alone, they've been inside your apartment, Sophia. Charles's hands curled into fists at his sides. They know your routines because they've been watching you sleep. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the violation of it, the intimacy of being observed in my most private moments. The line between us, I whispered, finally understanding. There is no line. They've already erased it. If they hurt me, they hurt you. Charles met my eyes, and I saw the truth there before he spoke it. That's always been true, Sophia. They're just the first ones to notice. The war room materialized in Charles's private study within the hour. Dmitry had pulled security footage across 6 monitors, each screen showing a different angle of my life I'd never known was being recorded. My morning coffee run. The gym I went to twice a week. The bookstore where I lost myself on Saturday afternoons. Here, Dmitry froze frame on a man in a FedEx uniform. This is your delivery operative. Now watch. He clicked to another feed. Different day, different uniform. Same jawline. Same way of holding his left shoulder slightly higher. UPS. Then here, dry cleaning service. Here, grocery delivery. Charles stood perfectly still, studying each image with the focused intensity of a predator identifying prey. Pull the roster. Everyone who has access to my schedule, Sophia's apartment address, and my security protocols. Already done. Dmitry pulled up a document. 17 people have clearance level sufficient to know both your movements and Miss Seeger's personal details. 17. I felt sick. These were people I saw every day, people I smiled at in the elevator, shared coffee with in the break room, trusted with confidential files worth millions. Cross-reference. Charles's voice was clinical now, emotionless. The man who'd confessed he had no contingency plan for losing me had disappeared behind the mask of the silent king. Anyone with financial irregularities, family and soul, connections to my father's old network, traveled to Eastern Europe in the past 6 months. Charles, I found my voice. You're talking about your people. Your team. I'm talking about eliminating variables. He didn't look at me. Sentiment is how people die, Sophia. Trust is how empires fall. That's paranoia. No. He finally turned, and his eyes were cold enough to burn. Paranoia is irrational fear. This is pattern recognition. Someone gave them your address. Someone told them which mornings I take meetings alone, which evenings you work late. That's not external surveillance. That's internal betrayal. Dimitri cleared his throat. 3 names flag on multiple criteria. He pulled up personnel files. Marcus Chen, head of digital security. His sister married into a sole crime family 2 years ago. Jennifer Park, your executive scheduler. She has a gambling problem, buried under debt consolidation loans. He hesitated, and I saw Charles's jaw tighten before Dimitri continued. Minjun Park, your cousin. The silence that followed was absolute. Minjun had been Charles's right hand for 8 years. The man who'd helped him transition from Mafia heir to legitimate businessman. The one person Charles called family after his father's empire fell. No. Charles's voice was barely a whisper. Not Minjun. He had dinner with you at Nobu the same day the surveillance message mentioned it. Dimitri's tone was gentle, but relentless. He was the only person you told about the location change. And he's been making encrypted calls to a burner phone registered in Bucharest. I watched something die in Charles's expression. Not anger, something worse. The last piece of faith in human loyalty crumbling to ash. Bring him in. The words were hollow. Quietly. I want to look him in the eye when he explains why he sold his family for. Charles stopped, recalculated. For whatever they offered him that was worth more than 15 years of brotherhood. Another message buzzed on my phone. We all stared at it. You're looking at the wrong betrayal. She's closer than you think. Charles looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw doubt flicker across his face. No, I breathed. Charles, no, you know me. I thought I knew Minjun. His voice cracked on the name. I thought I knew everyone. Trust shattered, like his phone against the window. And this time, there was no putting it back together. Charles sent Dimitri away with clipped instructions about surveillance protocols and security rotations, but I heard none of it. The doubt in his eyes had carved something hollow in my chest, and I couldn't breathe around the edges of it. The door closed. Silence pressed in from all sides. Say it. My voice was steady despite the tremor in my hands. Whatever you're thinking, just say it. He stood with his back to me, silhouetted against the cracked window and the Tokyo skyline beyond. The city lights made him look like a king, surveying a kingdom he no longer trusted. I've survived 3 assassination attempts, Sophia. Do you know how? I didn't answer. Didn't move. By trusting no one completely. By calculating every angle, anticipating every betrayal before it happens. He turned slowly, and the look on his face was worse than doubt. It was anguish, but you got past my defenses. Somehow, in 2 years of working together, you became the one person I stopped calculating around. That's not a crime, Charles. It is when it makes me weak. He moved closer, and I could see the war happening behind those dark eyes. It is when my enemies notice before I do. When they can send me a message that says, she's closer than you think, and make me doubt the only person He stopped himself, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. The only person you what? The question came out as a whisper, but it felt like shouting into a void. Don't. His voice was raw. Don't make me say it when I can't trust if it's real, or if you've been playing me from the beginning. Something inside me broke. Not gently. Not quietly. It shattered the way his control had shattered. The way trust had shattered. The way this whole, carefully constructed professional relationship had exploded the moment I hid my phone. I'm not playing you. I closed the distance between us, and I saw his breath catch. I'm falling apart because the man I've been in love with for 18 months is looking at me like I'm the enemy, and I don't know how to prove I'm not without sounding exactly like someone who's guilty would sound. The confession hung in the air between us, irreversible as a gunshot. Charles stared at me like I'd spoken in a language he'd forgotten. 18 months. The merger meeting in Singapore. My voice cracked. You defended my strategy to the board even though it contradicted yours. You chose truth over ego, and I realized I was in trouble. You never said anything. You're my boss. You're a man who lives in a world where emotions are leverage, and love is a liability. What was I supposed to say? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. That I noticed how you take your coffee? That I memorized which ties you wear when you're nervous? That I stay late because going home means not seeing you? His hand came up to my face, fingers trembling against my cheek. They'll use this. They're already using this. I know. I leaned into his touch, despite everything. Despite the danger and the doubt and the surveillance proving someone was always watching. But I'd rather die telling you the truth than live safely behind a lie. Don't say that, his voice broke. Don't talk about dying when I've just realized I can't. The explosion cut him off. The penthouse shuddered. Glass rained from the ceiling. And in the chaos of smoke and screaming alarms, Charles's body covered mine, shielding me from the blast. Phase 2. I gasped against his chest. Stay alive, he breathed into my hair. Whatever happens next, Sophia, stay alive. The safe house was a penthouse in Shibuya that didn't exist on any property records, purchased through shell companies layered so deep, even forensic accountants would lose the trail. Dimitri had me there within 40 minutes, driving routes that doubled back and switched vehicles twice. Charles stayed behind to deal with the authorities, the media, the carefully constructed lie about a gas leak that nobody actually believed. 3 floors of bulletproof glass and reinforced steel. 4 armed guards rotating shifts. Enough supplies to last 3 months if necessary. I lasted 6 hours before I started planning my escape. You can't leave. Dimitri stood in the doorway of the bedroom where I was packing the emergency bag they'd provided. His expression was somewhere between concern and resignation, like he'd known this was coming. Watch me. I zipped the bag closed. Someone just tried to kill Charles. Maybe me. Maybe both of us. And I'm supposed to hide in a luxury prison while he's out there exposed. He's not exposed. He has 24-hour security, armored vehicles, a team of... He has people who might be traitors. I faced Dimitri fully. You said it yourself. 17 suspects. 3 with clear motives. And 1 message that said I'm closer than they think. What if the person trying to kill us is one of those 24-hour security details? Dimitri's silence was answer enough. I won't be bait anymore. I slung the bag over my shoulder. But I won't be useless either. Someone is playing a game where Charles and I are the pieces. And the only way to win is to stop reacting and start hunting. Miss Seeger, Sophia, I corrected him quietly. If I'm going to die anyway, you can at least use my first name. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in that stone wall exterior. Charles will kill me if anything happens to you. Then help me make sure nothing does. I pulled out my phone, the new encrypted one Dimitri had given me. I need access to the security footage from tonight. The explosion wasn't random. Someone had to plant those charges, which means someone was in the penthouse before we arrived. The building has been locked down. Every person who entered or exited in the past week is being questioned. Then let me see the footage. I held his stare. I've spent 2 years watching people lie to Charles in negotiations, board meetings, merger discussions. I can spot a tell at 50 paces. Maybe I'll see something your security team missed. Dimitri considered this for a long moment. Then he pulled out a tablet and handed it over. 1 hour. Then I'm calling Charles and telling him you're planning something suicidal. 30 minutes. I was already scanning through timestamps. I work fast when motivated. The footage loaded, and I started at the beginning of the day, watching the mundane parade of cleaning staff, maintenance workers, delivery personnel. Everyone with credentials. Everyone checked against employment records. Everyone supposedly cleared. Then I saw it. Frame 1432. A maintenance worker in the elevator, toolbox in hand, heading to the 63rd floor. He glanced up at the security camera for just a fraction of a second. I knew that face. Not from Charles's world. From mine. Dimitri. My voice came out strangled. I need you to run a name for me. Marcus Chen's sister. The one who married into the Soul Crime family. What's her maiden name? He typed rapidly. Chen Meiling. Why? My hands were shaking again, but this time from rage instead of fear. Because the maintenance worker who planted the bomb is David Chen. My ex-boyfriend from college. The one I haven't spoken to in 5 years. The one who knew exactly where I'd be. The one who'd known me before Charles, before Tokyo, before any of this. The one who was closer than anyone thought. Call Charles, I said quietly. Tell him I found his traitor. And tell him she's been bait all along. Charles arrived at the safe house in under 20 minutes, which meant he'd broken every traffic law Tokyo had, and probably invented a few new ones. He came through the door like a storm given human form. All controlled fury and lethal focus, and the look he gave me was equal parts relief and rage. You stayed. It wasn't a question, but it sounded like gratitude. I stayed. I pulled up the footage on the tablet, but only because I found something you need to see. He watched the maintenance worker, watched David Chen glance up at the camera, And I saw the exact moment Charles's expression shifted from businessman to the mafia heir he'd tried to leave behind. Tell me everything, so I did. David Chen, my college boyfriend who'd seemed charming and ambitious until the night he'd asked me to steal exam answers from a professor's office. The breakup that had turned bitter when I'd refused to compromise my ethics for his GPA. The year of blocked calls and restraining order threats before he'd finally disappeared from my life. 5 years, I finished. I haven't thought about him in 5 years. I had no idea he was connected to Marcus Chen. No idea he was in Tokyo. No idea he'd somehow found me again. He didn't find you. Charles's voice was ice over steel. He was sent to find you. Marcus Chen's sister married into the Baek family, one of the crime syndicates my father destroyed when he consolidated power in Seoul. This isn't about you, Sophia. You're just the knife they chose to slide between my ribs. Dimitri pulled up more information on his laptop. David Chen entered Japan 4 months ago on a work visa. Maintenance contractor. He's been working in buildings across Tokyo, including 3 of your properties, Charles. Access badges show he's been in your penthouse 7 times in the past 2 months. 7 times. While I'd been there, working, trusting that every face I saw had been vetted and cleared, while Charles had been there, vulnerable despite all his security, because no one had connected David Chen to Sophia Seeger to Charles Harper. Where is he now? Charles's question was directed at Dimitri, but his eyes never left the screen. Unknown. Building security lost him after the explosion. Could be anywhere in the city. Then we make him come to us. Charles finally looked at me, and what I saw in his face made my blood run cold. We used the same weapon they used. We give them bait. No. I stood, understanding immediately what he was suggesting. Absolutely not. Sophia, you want to use me as bait? Actually put me in the crosshairs to draw them out? My voice rose despite my attempt at control. Charles, they've been trying to kill me for 3 weeks. They've been trying to position you. He caught my wrist, gentle but firm. If they wanted you dead, you'd be dead. The flowers, the surveillance, the messages. They've been making sure I know you're vulnerable so that when they finally strike, I'll break. But we can turn that around. We can make them think they've won. By making me visible. By making you irresistible. His thumb traced a circle on my inner wrist, right over my racing pulse. Tomorrow there's a charity gala at the National Art Center. 500 guests. All of Tokyo's elite. I'm expected to attend despite the quote gas leak. You're expected to be in hiding. I saw where he was going. If I show up on your arm, they'll think you're being reckless. Emotional. That you're choosing me over security. They'll think I've already lost. He pulled me closer. And when David Chen makes his move, when he tries to finish what the explosion started, we'll be ready. Dimitri will have every exit covered, every guest screened, every angle monitored. You're gambling with my life. No. His forehead pressed against mine, and his voice dropped to a whisper. I'm gambling with mine. Because if this goes wrong, if I lose you, they won't need to kill me. I'll be dead already. The tablet buzzed. Another message. Tomorrow at the gala. Come alone, or she dies screaming. Charles read it over my shoulder, and his arms tightened around me. Good, he said coldly. Let them think I'm coming alone. The National Art Center glittered like a jewel box, all glass and steel, and Tokyo's wealthiest pretending the explosion 2 days ago had been nothing more than an unfortunate accident. I wore midnight blue silk that Charles had sent to the safe house, and the diamond necklace from that first night, the one I'd been adjusting when he'd asked about my phone and changed everything between us. His hand rested at the small of my back as we entered, proprietary and protective, and I felt every camera in the room turn toward us. The whispers started immediately. The Mafia King and his assistant, appearing together after an assassination attempt, her in diamonds, and him looking at her like she was the only person in a room of 500. We were performing perfectly. Southeast corner, 2nd floor. Dimitri's voice crackled in the nearly invisible earpiece. Man matching David Chen's description, catering uniform, heading toward the service elevator. Charles's hand tightened on my waist. Sophia, stay close to me. That's the plan. I smiled up at him for the cameras, playing the part of the woman too in love to recognize danger. Until it isn't. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? But I was already moving, excusing myself with a polite smile to the ambassador's wife, weaving through the crowd toward the restrooms near the southeast corridor. I felt Charles tense behind me, felt Dimitri's protest crackling in my ear, but I kept walking, because I'd seen something they hadn't. The catering uniform was wrong. The National Art Center used black and white. The man heading toward the service elevator wore black and silver, the colors from the hotel down the street. David wasn't infiltrating the gala. He was leaving it, which meant the threat was already inside. I rounded the corner and saw her. Marcus Chen's sister, Mei Ling, dressed in an evening gown identical to mine, same midnight blue, same diamond necklace. From a distance, in a crowded room, we could be twins. She saw me at the same moment. Her hand went to her clutch, and I saw the gun before she could draw it. Don't. I kept my voice steady. You shoot me here, you'll never make it out alive. Dimitri has every exit covered. I don't need to make it out. Her smile was cold. I just need Charles to watch you die. The Bake family doesn't want him dead. They want him destroyed. They want him to live, knowing he couldn't protect the one thing that mattered. Behind me, I heard Charles's footsteps, heard him calling my name. Sophia, get down. But Mei Ling was faster. The gun came up, aimed not at me but past me, and I realized with horrifying clarity that I'd never been the target. I'd been the distraction. I threw myself backward as the shot fired, colliding with Charles as he reached me. We went down together in a tangle of silk and expensive suits, and I felt the bullet pass where my head had been. Felt Charles's body covering mine for the second time in 2 days. Felt his breath against my neck as he shielded me with everything he had. More shots. Dimitri's voice shouting orders. Security converging from every direction. When the chaos cleared, Mei Ling was on the ground, disarmed. 3 of Dimitri's men holding her down. David Chen was being dragged from the service elevator in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. And Charles was still covering me, his heart hammering against my back, his arms locked around me like he'd never let go. You ran toward the danger. He breathed into my hair. You brilliant, terrifying woman. You ran toward it. I saw the pattern. My voice shook. The uniform was wrong. I knew. You could have died. So could you. I turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. That's what they don't understand. We're not each other's weakness. We're each other's reason to survive. His kiss was desperate and public and absolutely not appropriate for Tokyo's elite charity gala, but neither of us cared, because we'd survived. Together. And the game was finally over. 3 weeks later, I stood in Charles's penthouse office. The glass repaired. The scorch marks erased. Everything returned to its pristine state, as if the explosion had never happened. As if the surveillance and the betrayal and the bullets had been nothing more than a nightmare we could wake up from. But my phone sat face up on the desk between us now. Always visible. Always accessible. No more secrets. No more hiding. Dimitri finished the security audit. Charles leaned against the desk, close enough to touch but giving me space to breathe. Marcus Chen was the primary architect. He'd been feeding information to the Bake family for 18 months, waiting for the perfect weapon to use against me. Me. I said it without bitterness, just acknowledgement of fact. You. He reached out, fingers brushing mine. They researched everyone in my life, looking for leverage. When they found your connection to David Chen, found out about your history, they orchestrated everything. The job offer that brought you to Tokyo, the introduction to my company, even the promotion to executive assistant was influenced by Marcus's recommendation. The implications settled over me like snow. I was always bait, from the very beginning. You were always meant to be my weakness, he corrected quietly. But you became my strength instead. That's what they didn't calculate. That's what their entire plan couldn't account for. I looked up at him, this man who'd been carved from control and discipline, who'd spent 15 years building walls high enough to keep everyone out. What happens now? Now. He pulled me closer, eliminating the careful distance he'd maintained. Now I stop pretending I can run an empire without emotions. Now I stop treating trust like a liability and start treating it like the only asset that actually matters. The board won't like that. The board can adapt or resign. His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. I spent 2 years watching you hide your feelings, watching you maintain perfect professionalism, while I fell in love with everything you tried not to show me. The way you fight for truth, even when it costs you. The way you run toward danger, instead of away from it. The way you trusted me, even when I doubted you. Charles, I'm promoting you. He said it with absolute certainty. Not executive assistant, partner. Equal stake in the company, equal say in every decision. If they want to use our relationship as a weapon, we'll make it armor instead. My breath caught. That's not how business works. It's how my business works now. His forehead pressed against mine. I've spent 15 years building an empire on the foundation of trusting no one. It made me powerful. It made me untouchable. It also made me alone. His voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want to be alone anymore, Sophia. I want to be human. With you. What if someone tries this again? The fear was still there, would probably always be there. What if they find another way too? Let them try. His kiss was soft, certain. We'll face it together. No more hiding phones. No more surveillance we don't control. No more pretending that loving you is anything other than the best decision I've ever made. My phone buzzed on the desk. We both looked at it. Old instincts rising. But this time, Charles reached over calmly and picked it up, read the message, and smiled. It's your sister. She wants to know if you're bringing someone to her wedding. He handed me the phone. Should I clear my schedule? I looked at this man who'd been the silent king, the feared mafia heir, the untouchable businessman, who'd broken every rule he'd built his life on, because I'd been worth more than his empire. Clear your schedule. I smiled back. And get used to being visible. No more shadows. No more shadows. He agreed, pulling me into his arms where anyone walking past the transparent office could see us. Just trust. And maybe that diamond necklace you keep trying to adjust. I laughed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath expensive fabric. You notice that? I notice everything about you. His voice held that edge of possession I'd learned to love. I always have. Outside the windows, Tokyo stretched endlessly. A city of millions living their lives under constant observation, every moment potentially surveilled, every secret potentially exposed. But in this room, with our phones face up and our hearts finally visible, we'd learned the truth. Love wasn't the vulnerability they'd tried to exploit. It was the weapon we'd use to survive anything. Together. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories.